let's talk about international marketing then. So we're going to be looking at different levels of market positioning. We're going to have a look at a simple marketing strategy, and we're going to look at the different aspects of a marketing strategy. And we'll also get into things like the ethics of advertising. So what is marketing? Marketing is a method by which businesses communicate with consumers about the product or the service with the ultimate purpose of making a sale to that consumer, converting them into, therefore, a customer, and doing all of this as part of the corporate strategy. Why am I emphasizing corporate strategy? Because simply selling to a customer like a salesperson does is sales, not marketing. And sales are tactical. In a sale, you're standing in front of an individual customer and you're trying to convince them to buy the product or to buy the service. Whereas marketing is a corporate level activity and it has to be done as part of the corporate strategy. International marketing is the same thing, but it adds this additional dimension of multiple markets and how to cope with those multiple markets. And by far the most efficient, the most effective thing to do is to treat the world as one single market. So actually international marketing tries to simplify the challenge of selling into multiple markets. What we're doing then is we're going to look at marketing in its broader form, and that one way of doing that is using the STP marketing model, which is segmentation, targeting, and positioning, where you gradually, progressively focus on the point of the sale to the consumer and converting them into a customer. You start off with international marketing about identifying the market, and you would do that with Porter's 5 forces or an equivalent theory, taking into account the fact that none of these theories are perfect, of course. So you would analyze the market and decide it is worth going into that market because you will make a profit there. Now you need to segment the market. So you map it out according to a couple of dimensions, and that'll give you an idea of how the market shapes up and where you fit into it, or where you could fit into it. So then you select the segment that you want and you target that. Right, those two, market segmentation, selecting the market, and previous to that, identifying the market, we did in last week's lecture, which was about market analysis and market entry. What we're going to be looking at now is product positioning, and then deciding on how you're going to market with that position in the segment. So that would be the marketing mix. Now, product positioning is based around what the consumer thinks about your product or service. So it's very much a mental construct. It's a perception. And as such, it doesn't exist in the real world. And because it doesn't exist in the real world, there's no actual position in an actual market. This is your construction of the market, your imagining of the market, your imagining of how to segment it, and therefore what you imagine or what the consumer imagines is the position of the product. And we need to figure out how the consumer is visualizing or perceiving the way the market works. And we can think about there being different dimensions to the market. So the market doesn't exist in reality, but we're going to give it this two-dimensional shape so that we can illustrate it. And we need these dimensions, obviously, what the two dimensions actually are. Usually one is price, the other one is some feature of the product. So that could be if it's all to do with clothing, whether it's leisure wear or formal wear. It could be whether the clothing is for fun or it's serious. I mean, say you're marketing a computer. Is the computer for games or is it for business? If you're selling cars, is it all about style or does it need to be practical? If you're selling Oh, I don't know. Garden furniture. Does it need to be premium garden furniture or just generic garden furniture with no brand? Let's have a look at watch brands then. So, as I said, along the bottom, usually you've got price, but it doesn't have to be. It could be something else. And in this case, I've chosen status. So there's high status and low status. Now, you could go another way. You could say, oh no, a feature of watches is their accuracy. So then you'd say high accuracy and low accuracy. Well, actually, that's been irrelevant in the watch market for a long, long time. You know, the really expensive watches, and Rolex is not one of the really expensive watches. A really expensive watch over here would be Patek Philippe. In this country, that starts at about £20,000, which would be in dollars, 25,000 US dollars. They're not a cheap watch. Maybe cheap to you, but you may be richer than me. And because Patek Philippe isn't that well known, I would say for our analysis, the status is a bit lower than, say, Rolex. So I put Rolex slightly higher, even though it's nothing like as good a watch. And it's not nearly as expensive. Yeah, I mean, in price, really, I suppose Patek Philippe should be over here somewhere. But for our consumers, our customers who are perhaps in the market of maybe one day buying a Rolex, for them, Patek Philippe is over here. Omega, although it's an older watch brand, it's in my humble opinion, it's a better watch. Technically, it's a better watch. The status in the minds of consumers is slightly below Rolex, and as a consequence, actually, they have to charge a lower price. Apple, at the moment, riding high, you know, pretty high status, the Apple Watch, but it is a lower price than either Rolex or Omega. I mean, it's actually a significantly lower price. It's probably over here somewhere, isn't it? Now, all of these watches, you know, really high status, but if we were to choose the other dimension, which is accuracy, then actually all of them will be somewhere down here because they're pretty in terms of accuracy, timekeeping ability, they're not particularly good because they're up against quartz watches. Quartz watches, much cheaper, lower status on our dimensions. If we were to use the other dimension of accuracy, then the quartz watches would be up here somewhere, highly accurate, but still cheap. Whereas these watches, which are not so accurate on the timekeeping, I mean, mechanically, for a mechanical watch, pretty good, not Apple. But Omega, Patek Philippe, Rolex, you know, pretty good for mechanical watches, definitely, but still nothing like as good as a quartz watch. So they would be over here somewhere. And then the question is, you know, whether this really makes any sense. All the quartz watches, all of these, have accuracy that's about the same. So they would all be on top of each other, squashed up over here. The only thing separating them would be price, but they'd all be lined up somewhere over here. Yeah, which would make it difficult. Not only would it be difficult then to be able to see what gaps there are in the market, it's in any case incorrect because people do not buy watches for their accuracy. They're buying them, generally speaking, for status. So if you're buying a quartz watch, it's because you like the look of it, you like the brand, perhaps it's got features, extra features on it, like, you know, an alarm, a stopwatch, things like that. So that's you'd buy it on other dimensions, not accuracy. Okay, so we can see here gaps opening up in the market. So maybe you'd want a sort of medium status watch somewhere over here. Being in China, maybe you've heard of the brand Grand Seiko. Grand Seiko is probably around about here. Yeah. You might, oh dear. I mean, there's clearly some sort of gap here, isn't there, with a very high price, but ordinary status watch. I don't know what would go here, but there are some German watches coming out. Germany used to be a big center of watchmaking, second perhaps to Switzerland, and all that was destroyed in World War II. Those brands are coming back. So you've got Glashütte, Langer, I'm just trying to think of some of the other ones. Nomos is another one. So a Lang can be very high price, somewhere over by near Patek Philippe, but not particularly high status, so somewhere over here. The question then is, what goes in this quadrant here? Yeah. So we've seen how useful this positioning map is, but there's a whole quadrant here that's empty. It's full of gaps. It is a gap. Well, there's a problem here. Why would anyone do a high price watch that has low status? So maybe let's take a really cheap brand. Seconda, I don't know if you have Seconda in China, is a British brand, but it's actually attached to, is just a brand attached to cheaper watches from other countries. There used to be Russian watches, rebranded Seconda. I know it sounds slightly Japanese, but I think that's what they're trying to do. And now I believe they're Chinese watches. So you might even recognize the odd Seconda watch. What would it be if Seconda decided to do a handmade English watch? It would be really high price, but it would have no status at all. Who's going to buy it? Yeah. So a problem with this positioning map is that it looks like it's got 4 quadrants, but actually a quarter of the map is completely useless. Yeah, this entire quadrant. So you got to watch it with these positioning maps. Okay, so the good things about using a map like this, it shows in a nice graphical, pictorial form where the gaps are, and then you can investigate. It means you can see where all your competitors are in this graphical, visual way. But it does depend, of course, on how you've decided to draw the map. And if you use different dimensions, it'll give you different information. But at least the dimensions provide a focus for your research. They're a really good starting point. And then you do your consumer research. So you draw your map, and then you start to investigate further. The disadvantages, though, gaps may exist for a good reason, like we've seen. So an entire quadrant is empty. It's not a gap. It's just completely empty because it makes no sense to be in that quadrant. And there may be gaps between certain brands. You know, the gap between Omega and Rolex may be so small that no other company can really get into that gap. And of course, competitors are doing exactly the same thing about you. So you're appearing on their map. And because we're only looking at 2 dimensions, and one of them is nearly always price, it's quite restrictive. And then finally, if you're using this map as a way of identifying gaps into which you can put a new product, well, actually, consumers are really poor judges of whether they're going to buy a new product. On that map, we saw Apple there, and I put the Apple Watch somewhere around about high status. But you see, people may buy an Apple Watch for a completely different reason, and it may be that it's not about status at all. It's about functionality. It may be about lifestyle more than status. So in which case, people could quite possibly have an Apple Watch and an Omega, and a Casio. Something that helps with positioning is branding. So branding is also something that exists in the mind of the consumer. It is again a mental construct. It's not, you can't give something the brand image that you want it to have. It has to be done with the cooperation of the consumer. And if the consumer disagrees with you, if you've messed up your branding strategy, then you'll end up with the wrong brand image. But it's very important, branding. People will invent brands anyway. So you might think that your product is just a nice, simple, generic product, but people will start to give your product and your name, because you can't really market a product with no name at all, no matter how generic it is. But people will start to read into it a character, an identity, yeah. And that identity that you get with all products is one that's understood by the people buying it. It helps them to understand the product in an easy to mentally store kind of way. Good branding, well, a strong brand communicates the unique advantages of the product. It promises a reliability or a dependability. It's that you know that the brand image you've got in your mind is not going to change. It'll always be appropriate. Yeah? So it needs to represent that product or that service in a genuine and an authentic way, but it's also something that needs to be understood throughout the company. It's not just projected outside of the company in the hope that consumers will understand the message, the marketing message that you're trying to get across. Branding is also a kind of marketing to the people who work for the company, and they need to understand how it works. Yeah. So if you've got a company like, say, Rolls-Royce, now I happen to know, and you probably do as well, that Rolls-Royce motor cars is actually owned by BMW of Germany, and all the engineering is by BMW of Germany. Most of the manufacturing is done in Germany, but final assembly is done in England. And it's done in England to try and maintain the brand image of Rolls-Royce as a quintessential example of a British motor car at its very finest, right? So you're trying to convince consumers, and it's working, that they're buying a British car. But you also need to get the workers on board. There aren't that many workers because, as I say, most of it is being done in Germany. But there is a small factory in the UK and a small number of British workers there. So if they don't buy into this brand image, they will be cynical. They will maybe not put so much pride into the work. They'll talk to customers about the cars really being German, not being English cars at all. So you need to be able to get the whole of the workforce on board as well. Some well-known brands here. These are rather well-known. So on the left, we've got Nike, haven't we? Then the middle one, I thought the middle one was Twitter, but it was pointed out to me the other day that actually it's not Twitter, that is Dove soap. And then the one on the right is Audi. Okay, so Nike, I think this one was invented by a student, apparently. I think this is a brilliant logo. It's got a feeling of speed to it because it's sharp. It's also got a feeling of bounce. So, feeling of being able to leap up into the air. Yeah, I think that's very clever because it's very subtle. It's very simple. It's very difficult for anyone else to copy that. The one in the middle, so Dove soap, which is sold as a pure white soap, and it has a moisturizer in it. Actually, one of the most important advances in soap technology. I can't believe I'm saying that, but soap, generally speaking, is generic, and there aren't many advances in soap. So Dove soap was quite an advance because it was the first time or the most successful occasion when moisturizer was put in soap. Moisturizer is seen, well, soap and moisturizer are seen as opposites. Soap strips the oil out of your skin, and then you have to have a separate moisturizer to put the oils back in. So it seems a bit odd to do both at the same time. So it is, I'd say it's a good logo because it's a picture of a dove, and doves are pure white. Doves are about peace. Doves are gentle birds. So it all makes perfect sense. But the fact that I've been confusing it with Twitter just shows it's not quite the strongest brand in the world, but it's not bad. Anyway, Audi here, 4 wheels, a real feeling of a car about it. Perhaps a little bit too close to the Olympic symbol, though, don't you think? The other thing is there's no feeling of motion to it. It's just 4 circles. but it is a very old symbol, and it's not Audi at all. It's the symbol is the logo for a company called Auto Union, and Auto Union is made up of 4 car companies, which I think are Horsch, DKW, NSU, and possibly Audi, but it may not be Audi. It may be a company called Wunderer. Audi actually disappeared in about 1947. So the name Audi was resurrected by VW in around about 1970. And that it was then used as the brand for Auto Union. They'd bought Auto Union, well, in about 1968 or something like that. Yeah, and they decided to rename it Audi, so they pulled a name out of the history books, and they decided to resurrect the Auto Union logo at the same time. Okay, so these are very well-known brands, very well-known logos, and they're said to have power. So it's said that the Nike brand is a powerful brand. And I just want you to reflect on what it means to have a powerful brand. So can you change the underlying product? So if Dove decided to get into petrol stations, fuel stations, selling diesel, could they do that? No, I don't think so. That would be overstretching the brand. Could Nike do burgers? I don't think so. Yeah. Auto Union, could they do soap? I don't think so. Yeah. So the power of this brand is really only the power to dominate the segment. It'd be very difficult for someone else to develop a similar soap to Dove and try and compete with a similar kind of brand. Yeah. So Dove dominate their market segment. And it's really not transferable beyond that particular product or service. So the logo is a very important part of branding, but it's not the brand itself. Yeah, there's much more to the brand, and the brand is communicating a lot of things that the logo tries to communicate, but in a very sort of subtle, very subconscious kind of way. Another thing about these powerful brands is that once they go out of fashion for whatever reason, they disappear. So Kodak, absolutely, totally dominant in the film, consumer film industry, gone pretty much. You can still buy them actually, but that power has gone. Eveready, if you've ever heard of them, made batteries. Yeah. Good name for a battery, excellent name for a battery, so much better than Duracell, probably about as good as Energizer, I suppose, but company went bankrupt, brand has gone. Woolworths, a very strong brand in many countries. In the UK, now bankrupt, so it's disappeared. No one has taken that brand on. Actually, partly because it's a tainted brand. It became, although it was very dominant in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, it began to lose its power in the 1980s when it became known as a cheap place to shop. And cheapness is never an attractive quality. Budget, yes. Good value for money, yes. Cheap, no. And then Blockbuster got all about videotape rentals, disappeared because it's been taken over by Netflix, and it's all about streaming. Okay, we need theories that explain branding. So two very well-known names in this academic discipline are the Arkers, David Arker the father, Jennifer Arker the daughter. So David Arker took a very broad approach to brand identity and saying that it has 4 different aspects. There's the product itself, what attributes the product has, how it's valued by the consumer. So the iPhone, for example, you value the style, the simplicity, the elegance of an iPhone. The organization itself, we've seen this with Apple. So how Steve Jobs embodies what the organization is about. So that's maybe the core value concept we've seen in my model. Persons, that's a relationship between the brand and the customer. So this is where lifestyle comes into it, and how that brand fits in with the lifestyle. We've got the symbol, how the company tries to represent the brand through the logo, through brand heritage. Saw that with Audi. You know, Audi actually is a reconstituted brand. It disappeared as a company, as I said, in the late 1940s. And disappeared. I mean, that was the end of Audi. So the Audi we know today, although they talk about having a long brand heritage, they don't. The brand Audi that we know today has a heritage going back no further than about 1970. And many people would say that actually the Audi we know today is really NSU. NSU was the car company that lasted until 1970. It was bought by VW. But the NSU brand was a tainted brand. It was what's the word? It was a faulty brand. Yeah. Okay, Jennifer Archer, though, she looks more at the brand personality. So she thinks a brand should have sincerity, so it should appear honest and straightforward, have a sense of excitement about it, so it's innovative. It should appear competent, so you can rely on it, sophisticated, yeah, and also rugged. And you can think of them actually as dimensions. So some brands like, say, Rolex, very rugged. I don't know about sophisticated. Not so sophisticated, very competent. Excitement. Oh, I don't know about excitement. I don't think a Rolex is particularly excitement. No, they don't really innovate, do they? Whereas Apple would be very high on excitement, yeah, and it'd be high on sophistication, but not ruggedness, I don't think. I don't think an Apple Watch is known for being tough or resilient. I just want to briefly look at this one. This is the Perrier brand, and it's another brand that's failed. Now, the Perrier brand was very famous in the 1980s. And the 1980s in the West, certainly, I don't know about China, but in the West, it was a period of high economic growth, and it was a very materialistic, hedonistic period when the symbols of success were brands like Porsche, Ray-Ban sunglasses, the Perrier brand, Armani suits. Oh, just trying to think of a few others. I can't think of any others, but it was one of those. Yeah, so very much a premium image, very high recognition factor, very high sales in the UK. But you have to think also about what the brand image was. It wasn't just about material success. The thing about mineral water is that it has to be pure. Yeah, and the idea is it has to feel purer than ordinary tap water. This is not true. In actual fact, tap water and mineral water are as good as each other, but mineral water somehow feels like that the perception is in the mind of the consumer that it's purer. What happened to Perrier was that some contaminant got in there. It was benzene. Benzene causes cancer. And that went right to the very heart of the brand image, destroyed the brand image. So although Perrier did everything right, they withdrew the product extremely quickly. They rectified the problem, relaunched into the market, but the market had moved on. There was no space anymore for Perrier. It was a tainted brand. So you might want to think about, I won't do it here because it'll take too long, but you might want to think about if you were to return Perrier to the market, to market prominence, would you position it in a new place? So maybe go up market or down market? Would you rebrand it, just change the name? Yeah. Or would you try and do something with its existing brand image? You try and get back into the old market segment with the old brand image, but just try and convince people, spend huge amounts of money to get it back into position. Good luck with that, because Perrier have tried it many times themselves and it hasn't worked. Okay, and it's also tempting, of course, with all this powerful branding about to just copy someone else's brand. So a counterfeit brand is one that infringes on the intellectual property rights of whoever owns the brand. It's not quite the same as a copy. A copy is legal. Yeah, so you could copy, say, a Rolex and put your own brand on it, and that's all right. Yeah. It tends to affect, most of all, what you might call mastige products. Mastige is a portmanteau word. It's a new word, an invented word, but it's a combination of mass-produced and prestige products. Huge industry worth hundreds of billions a year. The original brand owners are therefore losing out on money they could use on R&D. These counterfeits, of course, won't be taxed because they're illegal. So the government loses money. The brand owner has to try and sue these people. So that costs money, and that costs the customer money. There's no oversight in the supply chain of counterfeit branding, so people can be working in awful conditions and no one is looking after them. And it can undermine and cheapen the original brand. But it's not all negative. I mean, one of them is that it means that people can buy what they want, the brand that they want, but at a much lower price. So they can buy what they can afford. No, if you can never afford a Rolex, well, buy what they call a knockoff Rolex. And I suppose it's creating employment in developing countries, which are the ones that tend to engage in this counterfeit branding. So a counterfeit Rolex won't come from Rolex, and it won't be employed. It won't come from Switzerland, and it won't be employing any Swiss people. It'll be made somewhere like, I don't know, Bangladesh, yeah, and it'll be employing people in Bangladesh. So, maybe it's not all bad. And some of these fakes, where you can see it straight away, can't you? Because it's written there. So if you can read English, you can tell which one's fake. But so here's the fake one. The differences are tiny. This is a bit of a mistake. Is a bit of a splodge, whereas that's neatly done. The other thing is, if you look at the font. Oops, sorry. If you look at the font, then it's not quite as neat here as it is here. Yeah. The other thing, of course, is the real one will last you a whole lifetime as long as you keep getting it serviced, whereas this one with a cheap movement inside would probably last about 5 years. But that's fine, because it's so much cheaper. Then, as from the consumer's point of view, they just throw it away. I mean, it's not very good for the environment, of course. Okay, right. So we've talked about branding, but we're moving into a new world now, and a world of online retail. And it may be that there are generational differences in attitudes to branding. And there is this idea about Generation X, Generation Y, the baby boomer generation. I have a problem with this idea of generations, because if there's one thing we know about human beings for sure, is that they are not born in batches. They're not born in generations. They're coming off a continuous production line, and they're all pretty much the same. Yeah, there are no big new design updates going on with human beings. So as long as the world itself is not changing enormously, it's difficult to see why people should be in different, distinct generations. Having said that, the original sort of generation that we think of in these terms is the baby boomer generation after World War II. They were born into a different world. Pre-World War II, post-World War II, quite a different world. So the baby boomers, those born from about 1950 to 1970, it might be, they were different to the previous generation. I am not sure that Generation X that came after them is distinctly different, because the world wasn't distinctly different. Yes, it developed, of course, but it wasn't wasn't hugely different. Anyway, when we get up to generation Y, now they were born into, or they grew up, and this is seen as this generation has grown up with online retail. They're seeing the internet as like their third hand, their second brand, and they're much more aware of online brands, less awareness of high street brands. But it may be they're actually shopping in an entirely different way. We've talked about paradigms before, and it's possible that if online retail is a whole new paradigm, then along with that is a different attitude to branding. And e-commerce tends to be about the utilitarian aspect, the practical aspect, meaning how much is it, and is the product available right now? And hedonic, which means, am I having fun? The social aspect of shopping has now disappeared. Yeah, and the comparative side, perhaps, where you're comparing products with people you know, that's disappeared. And the online experience is measured by the flow, how people move through a website. And what makes them move through are these two aspects. The utilitarian side, they're looking for different products on the same website. They're perhaps comparing prices on the same website. And hopefully they're having fun. And that's what keeps them going through the website. If that doesn't happen, they can switch out in an instant, which is different from high street shopping, where it's the shop window that attracts you in. And then once you're in, you're flowing through, you're moving through the shop, but you're moving through for a different reason. You're not looking for fun. You're not particularly looking for prices as such. You're searching visually. Yeah. In the online environment, trust becomes really important. The online brand is actually really difficult to establish. You can establish it on the high street because you can put up a sign, you can put up your logo or something like that. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a drink. And people are seeing it all the time. But online, people are doing more active shopping, and that what they will tend to do is not shop by the brand so much, is they will go into Google, they'll put in the product they want, and then they just go for the cheapest one they can find, very much that utilitarian side. What this could mean is that if you want to maintain your branding online, you must first maintain a high street presence. Oh, it's not moving on. Oh, it's not moving. Why is it not moving? Oh, here we are. Let me just check I haven't raced on too far. Yeah, okay. Right, so we need some kind of marketing plan. And what's often talked about is the marketing funnel. Marketing funnel as a concept seems to have disappeared a little bit. It's become unfashionable, really, because there are equivalent sort of cones and things like that. It's the idea that with marketing, you first of all try and scoop up, you try and net as many people as you can, get communicating with them, knowing that of that mass of consumers you've scooped up, only a minority are going to be converted into customers. So that's where you get your funnel from. Online then, this can be about a website that can reach out and grab loads of people, get a nice big audience going, yeah, and then act, according to this model, act actually means interact with people. So we saw with the previous slide, it's about utility, and it's about the hedonistic side, the fun side. So you need to, having got people onto your website, you need to interact with them, keep them amused, keep them going, keep them flowing through the website. And then hopefully you'll be able to convert them into a customer. But what will happen then is next time they go shopping, they go to another website. So you need to make sure you can engage with them to keep repeating that business. I mentioned before about the STP model right at the very beginning. So we've got segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Right at the end of this process, when you position the product and you've established your brand, is the marketing mix, how you're actually going to market this thing. Now, the 4 Ps is particularly well known and is made up of thinking about the product. So how does the customer value the product? How are you going to deliver that value to them? The price of it, for us in international marketing, what the international pricing strategy might be. And if we're selling cheaply in one market and expensively in the other, what are the dangers that people will buy grey imports? In other words, they'll import from the cheap market into the expensive market and get around your imports. Promotion, how are you actually going to promote it? And place, how do you bring it to the customer? So the distribution network, the shops that you're going to display in, that kind of thing. That's the 4 Ps. The trouble is the 4 Ps is probably not enough. Now there's a video here. I'm not going to attempt this video because the last one didn't work. But Philip Kotler himself thought the 4 Ps was enough. Despite the growth of online retail, still very much believe the 4 Ps enough. Be cautious here. Philip Kotler makes a lot of money as a keynote speaker talking about the 4 Ps. Any other Ps are beyond his particular brand image, if you like. Yeah. So he will resist the idea of there being other Ps, because if he admits there are other Ps, then he has to admit that whoever else has been promoting the 7 Ps has actually got a better idea of what's going on with marketing than he has. So he's always going to defend the 4 Ps. What are the other Ps then? Well, if we think about Starbucks, the 4 Ps doesn't explain Starbucks at all. It does in a very sort of generic, basic, simple kind of way, but Starbucks is so much more than that. It's about the people who work there. It's about the customer service. It may be about the personality of the founder. We've seen with Tesla how important Elon Musk is as a person, and how his personality is now destroying Twitter. Actually, I don't think it is his personality. I think his personality fits Twitter, and he's actually making strategic mistakes with Twitter. Anyway, so we've got people. The process is so important when you go into Starbucks that you hear and can smell the coffee being made. Physical evidence, pictures on the walls, nice armchairs in the windows. All of this is telling you that this is a place for a sophisticated interaction with like-minded people with a quality product on offer, a quality experience on offer. You might want to think, therefore, about the iPad or the Apple Watch, the 4 Ps, product, pricing, what kind of sales strategy going for, where you sell it, the place, how you bring it to the customer. But again, it's really not bringing out the true competitive advantage of Apple, which is about the people selling it, the process that's involved, the physical evidence. So important that an Apple shop looks really cool, really technological, exciting, but very simple, very elegant. So it's all part of the brand image, promoting the brand image. And that's perhaps the problem with the 4 Ps. So the 4 Ps sort of leaves branding to a previous stage in the marketing process. You've done your branding, now you're on to the 4 Ps. But branding is actually very much about the marketing mix. Yeah. So you do all your preparation work, but then you put branding into the marketing mix, but it doesn't appear in the 4 Ps. You might say that it's not specifically appearing in the 7 Ps either. Although I suppose people, process, physical evidence, I mean, all of this connects to branding, but maybe there's something more. Another thing that's worth pointing out about the 4 Ps and the 7 Ps, it is that it is itself a marketing campaign. It is in itself a marketing approach, because it's the 4 Ps. And the 4 Ps is easy to remember. It's very snappy. It rolls off the tongue. So this theory has been branded. Yeah. And because it's being branded, it has limitations. And what doesn't fit the brand are any other words that don't begin with P. Yeah. So, you know, something like the word brand would probably belong in here somewhere, but it's not a P. So it's not there. Another link there. Ooh, yeah. I don't think you'll be able to watch that, but anyway, it's there. Perhaps someone you know in the UK can send it to you, but give it a try. Okay, so now we're on to advertising, because we've talked. The 4 Ps contains this one of the Ps being promotion. Well, what about advertising and ethical advertising, particularly at the moment? The idea that advertising isn't just trying to convince people to buy a product or service. It needs to do it in a way that's honest, fair, and responsible. Ethical advertising is talked about, but it's more of a stance, if you like, a perspective on the advertising you do. It's not a specific strategy. Unethical advertising may not be illegal, but it's often effective. So there's always a temptation towards unethical advertising, and advertising is always a bit of a fantasy, isn't it? So some advertising can be trying to put across the idea, or in a very subtle way, that if you use a certain shampoo that you're going to be beautiful. It's not just good for your hair, it's going to make you look beautiful and slim and give you clear skin and nice eyes and stuff like that, and make you look tall, because that's the sort of message in the advertising. Oh, okay, ethical advertising then. So advertising is always on the borderline between truth and lies, if you like. Marks and Spencer's, I talk a lot about Marks and Spencer's because they're a dominant high street presence in the UK, not famous abroad, of course, although they were in Hong Kong for a while. I think they might have withdrawn. But as so often with retailing, it only worked in the domestic market. It's very difficult to get into foreign markets, because foreign markets are saturated markets and have been saturated markets for hundreds of years. So it's really difficult to get into a retail market in a foreign country, because they never have a new retail market. Anyway, so they've failed to expand abroad. And every now and then, because they've been in this country for so long and dominant for so long, they start to get complacent. They lose contact with their customers, and they begin to look old-fashioned. And they tried a TV advert which was ultra honest, if you like, where they showed a woman, for some bizarre reason, throwing off her clothes and running up a mountain. And when she got to the top, she shouted out something like, "I'm free." The thing about the honest part of it was that she was not some slim, skinny supermodel. She was what you might describe as a real woman. So she wasn't exactly skinny. Now, of course, in reality, that's not a problem. But advertising is about showing you your fantasy self. You know, this is how you aspire to be. And this advert was very much not how people aspired to be. And it was an absolute total failure. What they then did was they got an ex-supermodel. She's called Twiggy. You perhaps wouldn't have heard of her, but she was like, well, you know, Marilyn Monroe. She was kind of the Marilyn Monroe for Britain for the 1970s. But what made her a little bit different was she had a very wholesome image, if you like. She was like, she was very friendly. She wasn't, although she was famous, she wasn't a prima donna. She was the kind of person that everyone felt friends with. So they brought her back in about 2000. 2000, 2010. And that was enormously positive because by then she was a mature woman, but she was still beautiful. And she was still very approachable, very friendly, felt like one of us. And that was absolutely brilliant. And it worked for about 10 years. Have a look. If you can find the Pepsi commercial, they did a very controversial commercial about 5 years ago. And I think one of the Kardashians was in it. So have a look at that. I can't show it here. I'm not going to attempt to show it here. It's a real shame these links aren't working because this particular lecture, of course, I've got loads of them. And there's another one that you might want to look at for Dove. And what happened with the Dove advert? Look, you should be able to find this somewhere. And what it is that it's 3 women as a kind of a visual trick. What they're doing is they're taking off a jumper, a sweater. Yeah, so they're taking off their top. And as they take it off, then it switches to another woman. Yeah, so you've got an Asian woman, a black woman, and a white woman. And so there's an Asian woman, smiling and laughing, takes a jumper off, and as she takes a jumper off, her face then changes to the black woman, and then she does the same thing, and she's then revealed to be a white woman, and it goes around this loop. So the white woman then becomes the Asian woman, and round it keeps going. But some people said that it made it look as though if you wash with Dove soap, it will change you from a black woman to a white woman. Absolutely ridiculous, surely. And I find with students now that they will look at it and they will call it out. They will say, well, this isn't a negative stereotype at all. So people will get very emotional about these things, and you can find ads that everyone finds objectionable at one stage. Later on, with a bit more perspective, people will decide, oh no, it was fine, really. So do seek out that Dove advert. You should be able to find it and see what you think. Okay, so what does this mean from a professional point of view? And you will be professional managers. You may not be marketing specialists, but you do need these skills. So if you wanted to go into marketing as a profession, it's helpful to have those formal qualifications. But all managers need to have knowledge of the way marketing works. And it's a significant advantage if you have broad-based life skills. So that will give you insights into the way different customers work. I was just trying to think of an example. Well, you see, I was a car salesman for 1.5 years, and that was really an incredible experience because it really showed me precisely what consumers are looking for in a car. And they will say, well, I was selling VWs, and you probably heard of the Golf GTI. The Golf GTI in the 1980s, like Perrier water and Porsche, it was like a Golf GTI was a Porsche for poorer people. A highly fashionable car. And people would come in and they would say, I want a GTI because I've heard they're reliable, because I heard they're good quality, they have a good resale value. And it was all total nonsense. And I realized that people would make up reasons for buying something. They would make up the rational argument because it's actually a purely emotional reason that they're buying. So you need those kind of insights to understand how people work. And you need these broad corporate skills. But you also need to be, if you want to get on in marketing, you need to have drive. If you're not ambitious, then you won't get very far in marketing. Try and get that basic marketing experience. If you're offered it in a firm and you can spend a few weeks, perhaps doing not a mentoring program. What am I trying to say? Not a placement. I can't remember. Not induction. I'm fumbling towards the word. You probably know the word better than I do. But it's when you can spend a few weeks or a month or so at a company, getting some experience, if you're offered marketing experience, do grab it. And remember that the technological development of the products, of the way they're promoted, is something you have to keep up with. A few sources for you there, not many. And that is it.